Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Apologies about the delay, been really busy with the new doggo, but I finally had some time to whip together a new sets video just so I could discuss and show what I'm currently using for my bow and cannon setups here in Wild Hearts. I was also holding off on making this video until the bow update that happened yesterday just to see what would change if anything, and no, not much. And as far as the Karakuri spam katana build goes, that hasn't really changed much either, we're just getting more blade to bar. I'm going to do a separate video on that later and just kind of do some more meme stuff with that. But anyway, let's just dive into this. So first, let me go over the cannon builds. The first one here is going to be my standard raw focused high laser cannon using the Golden Tempest cannon. With the new weapon upgrades, it's a little bit stronger than Ember Plume, so I'm going to be using this as my standard cannon build for now. Here's the tree if anyone is interested. In the event that you don't have key-based fortification talisman and want that skill, you can grab it on the left-hand side there, just drop desperation, and then you don't have to go to the whole right side at all. The talismans for this set are mostly focused around Pummel Bolster, which is a great way to scale damage on deeply volatile monsters, as it is a multiplicative damage modifier rather than an additive one like Desperation. Desperation is still a fine choice, don't get me wrong, as are any combination of that and Battle Spirit, Crit Master, Hawkeye, Lion's Den, the Bolsters, and even status applicators like Poison Wielder and Flame Wielder. Just use what you got. Moving on to the armor, I'm still using Ember Plume's hat just because deaf ears. The chest and waist are also the monkey parts for the Pummel Bolster, but you can use Grimstalker chest and the 12% Battle Spirit pants, I think it's the Bright Eye Archer. Those are good options as well. Gloves are Ember Plume because there really aren't any good gloves for cannon, and it's got some damage at least. And the boots are going to be Grimstalker for the Hawkeye and just some stamina management. If you have the talismans, you can easily shift this over to a human side tree to run Verve and some one-stroke critical, but I really don't have the means to do that right now, maybe in the future, so I'm pretty much sticking to full kimono right now. But this is going to be the raw cannon, and it should be efficient against pretty much any target and serve as a good baseline to use when you just don't have a better option. Speaking of better options, let's move on to the crit cannon. This build is all about stacking crit, which is even easier to do now thanks to the new Crit Master talismans. Obviously the cannon is going to be Grimstalker, but since my last update I've also decided to take off Desperation in order to get another level of Threadthrifter to maintain a longer laser duration, which pairs well with the chain crit and crits in general, because as I mentioned before in the previous videos, when you get crits for the laser ticks, that procs, chain crit, and then you get basically chain crit through the entire laser and the final explosion. It all just weaves together really well. And again, here's the tree for this cannon, which doesn't need to be all that complicated. I just had originally pathed down the right side for Desperation, and only recently gave it up. For the talismans, obviously we want crit, but also I'm using a few other oddities here. First is that I have a Deaf Ears talisman, which you can get from Craze Comb, but if you don't have that, you probably want Deaf Ears on your helmet instead. Next is that while my talismans are crit, I also have Flame Wielder and an Infernal Blow talisman to get me some Ignite statuses in. I don't expect other people to have these. Again, they're not really mandatory, they just happen to be on my crit talismans. Other skills you want besides these, again, are going to be, Slash Bolster, since Grimstalker's cannon is a slash weapon, Desperation or Verve if you're on human side, the one-stroke skills, Hawkeye, Lion's Den, usual DPS stuff, and of course more status application. The armor set for this is going to be all Grimstalker because it's really good. Slash Bolster, Rally, Fury, Destruction Art, Hawkeye, all good stuff. And then we got like Grimstalker pants, but it's still the same family. Again though, depending on your talisman makeup, you could definitely go human sight, especially here on crit stacking builds because one stroke crit is very, very strong. You can easily maintain 100% crit if you're really smart with your part breaks. But again, I just don't have the talismans to support it right now. The crit cannon is mainly going to be used for deeply volatile monsters to pierce their defenses, especially when I don't have an apt elemental counter, so against things like Laharbak mostly, and probably Crow soon. Moving on, we have the fire cannon, obviously going to be used for anything that's weak to fire, and of course it's Grimstalker cannon because we have to use the new weapons for elementals, the only reason why they're worth using. This cannon is set up for as much laser duration as possible with the 2 Threadthrifter and 1 speed change, but it's not quite maxed. And while I have Desperation here, you can also run Fire Wilt, but I still don't know what it does exactly. Or you can even run Key-Based Fortification if you don't have a talisman for it, and that's also on the left side of the tree. Speaking of talismans, we're obviously going to be running Fire Boost on our talismans, but I'm also trying out Infernal Blow. I don't know how effective it is by comparison, to be honest. I'm going to have to do some testing to see if it's noticeable, but it's just a lot easier to fit on our sets now that we have 80 points usable. Other worthwhile skills include any cannon related skill like Speed Heat, Threadthrifter, or Speed Charge if you have talismans for those. Pummel Bolster, Flame Wielder, Destruction Art are also really good bets as well. Do remember that things that specify attack, such as Desperation, only apply to raw and not the element side, so it has less value here. Whereas things like Bolster that say damage applies to everything. Getting into the armor now, pretty standard setup as you can see, still have Emerald Plume hat and arms, monkey chest and waist, and Grimstalker boots. Pretty much the usual for me at this point. Monkey parts just have Pummel Bolster, which is really nice. But I'm going to try to make this quick, so let's just keep going. And then lastly, we have the Wind Cannon, which is basically identical setup to the Flame Cannon, except that we're going to be using Wind Boost or Pummel Bolster talismans. The cannon itself has Wind Wilt, so I opted to get Wind Wilt just because, 12% seemed alright. Still unsure what it does though. Alright, let's move on to the bows really fast. Starting with the raw cookie cutter bow build, we're actually going to be using Fumebeak's bow for our raw bow now. Compared to Golden Tempest that we were using before, we're only losing 26 attack, but we gain 10% poison and 5% crit on top, which is a pretty stellar trade. Poison is very, very strong, and essentially we just get it for free. Now technically there are two types of bows that we can use for this setup. The Moonlit bow, which has 20% Broken Beast Screaming Arrow, which is just more explosive damage for our bows, or we can go to the Parhelion bow, which trades that for 20% Extreme Archery, both of which very good. It's your choice, and thankfully you can build the same bow in the one path and just move it up or down depending on what you need. For my bow skills, I'm opting for Desperation, Knocking Marvel, and 20% Extreme Archery because I'm going to be having a Speed Shooter talisman. I highly recommend you get Speed Shooter on the bow if you don't have it on the talisman. Just drop like one Extreme Archery. For the talismans, we're going to want Desperation and Lunge Bolster as much as possible. One Stroke Fury is also good, and any other bow related talismans like Extreme Archery or Ephemeral Lightning Arrow or Deep Arrow also work out just fine, as do stamina boosting talismans to alleviate some of the food pressure. My armor set hasn't changed much since the game started. Ember Plume hat and chest, mostly because the chest has 15% self-control, which is amazing for stamina management against deeply volatile monsters. Tiger arms for the core boost, and now I'm going to be using the Jade Dance legs for core boost instead of monkey legs, since they also provide another 7% presence of mind now. And lastly, we have Grimstalker feet, because they're just too good. I use them on like everything. As mentioned before, this is the raw bow setup. This is my go-to general purpose bow set, and works really well against pretty much every monster, but especially ones weak to poison like Laharback and Grimstalkers. Next, we're going to have the crit bow, which I honestly don't care for too much right now. My main problem with crit bow is that chain crits don't really stay active long enough to put the arrows into a monster and then swap over to Bolster 2 to detonate them. And the way chain crit works makes it so that when you detonate your arrows, they all apply damage at the same time. So you can't get crit during the explosion and have the rest of the explosions get chain crit effects, at least as far as I can tell. So the crits are actually very inconsistent. Plus, bow crit damage is still super low, so I don't think it justifies the raw loss of the weapon itself. So I have it and I'm still trying to update it, but I don't know. I just think I'm going to shelve it for now, and I don't really know what I'm actually going to use it on. But for reference, here is the bow and its upgrade path. Same skills, but I opted for chain crit instead of desperation now to try and sustain those crits better. Talismans are all crit master and speed shooter talisman. Armor is going to be the same for the raw setup, except I swapped the gloves to Grimstalkers for the slash bolster and follow through to regen some stam on crit. Ideally, this bow would be useful for those deeply volatile kimono that I don't really have a counter to, like Laharback. But he's also super weak to poison, so I just use the raw bow for that. So, I'm not really seeing much of a reason to use crit bow right now, but I'm going to hold on to it in case I get, some better talismans or something changes. Okay, and then we have the elemental bows, which again, not hugely invested into, mostly because they have a significantly harder time maintaining their stamina compared to the raw builds, since they need to eat for the elemental boosting food, which takes away from the stamina reduction food that raw bow would use. I'm still trying to figure out the optimal way to use these, but for now I'm using the same set as my raw bow, desperation included, as I still don't know what wilts do, and the bow trees only have 3% wilt as an option as opposed to cannons 7%, so it doesn't really seem worthwhile to me in my opinion. I just might as well bridge that gap in the raw, so I'm using desperation. Wind bow can path around for speed shooter without wasting a slot, so we can actually free up our talismans there. The talismans in general, we're going to be running fire boost and infernal blow for our fire bow, obviously. Speed shooter if you have it, otherwise just get it on your bow. Wind bow will be using just full wind boost talismans. It's the only real difference here. Armor set is going to be using the same across the board, same as my raw set. Some other skills that you should use for your talismans for both the fire and wind set, or basically all elemental sets. are more lunge bolster, desperation even, just so you have more raw, Hawkeye, fatigue recovery, and the other stamina boosting skills, stuff like that. I don't really think there's much on the human side that's going to help. So the elemental bow's damages are significantly better than raw bow when using it against an appropriate target, but the stamina management is so much worse, so do keep that in mind. If you do end up eating just stamina food as you would with the raw bow, the damage is pretty much going to be about the same because you're going to be losing 30% elemental damage from food. And then at that point, you're doing the same damage as the raw bow, but the raw bow also gets poisoned. So tough call all around. Bow is just in a really weird spot right now. But anyway, those are going to be my builds in Wild Hearts until next week when we get the Deeply Volatile Crow. So I'll have to shuffle those things around then. But in the meantime, I hope this does help somewhat in planning or deciding on what to farm for next. So thank you all for watching, and thank you to my Patreon members. Very much appreciated. If anyone wants to talk shop about Wild Hearts or gaming in general, feel free to join my Discord in the description below. That's going to be all for me. Thanks. Good luck out there, hunters. Peace.